Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being a part of the new episode of the Coast to Coast podcast on InsideCarolina.com. You thought I was going to give you something else, didn't you? No, it's just a new episode of the Coast to Coast. And we're glad you're here. I'm Joey Powell, host. We're brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt. All right. Thanks for being a part of the show tonight, whether you're watching, listening. I guess if you're listening in the daytime, it doesn't have to be tonight. You can be listening in the morning, whenever, however, or wherever or whenever you're consuming the show. We're glad you're here. And we're thankful for everybody who's a part of our little family here on Inside Carolina's Coast to Coast podcast. The two main family members that you really care about, the paterfamiliae. How's that for some Latin plural? Sherrell McMillan and Sean Moran are here with me. Boys, how you feeling?
Doing well.
Cricket's awesome.
Doing
Uh,
well.
Sean, I appreciate you for answering and stepping up and being the man to lead. So, with that said, let's get rolling. Bringing you the news of North Carolina basketball and potential commitments, signees, transfer portal goodness. Sean, this past weekend, Elliot Cadeau, more goodness and flashes and all sorts of insanity that is making Inside Carolina subscribers drool and foam at the mouth and get really, really giddy and all sorts of happiness because they've seen what this youngster is able to do on the basketball floor. You saw him. You also just did a write up at what he did at Geico. Tell me more about what you're learning about Elliot Cadeau's game, what you think he brings, and what you're seeing new since you've been able to watch him more and more.
Yeah, well, he went right from Geico to playing AAU, so it was a pretty quick turnaround. I'd say for a lot of players, AAU really kicks off Final Four weekend in terms of some of the bigger tournaments. I know it does start a little bit earlier depending on when people lose in the state tournaments, but usually Final Four weekend is a pretty big one for local matchups, and then that continues really through April 21st, where then is the first live recruiting period, and now you have your true nationwide Nike, Under Armour, Adidas tournaments. So going back to Cadeau playing in Geico, he obviously had a fantastic tournament, leading his team to 3 straight wins, winning the championship. I think the averages were just a little under 10 points per game, a little under 10 assists per game, and around 4 turnovers per game. So still a pretty good assist to turnover ratio. But once again, it was his passing, his vision that he showed off in Geico. He had a really talented team, so not as much need to score. First game, he only had 2 points, but he followed that up with 16 points. Went 5 for 10 from the 3-point line. Obviously, a very small sample size, but I think that is really the main thing to watch going forward in some of the tournaments. I think through all the high school and AU games that he had played up through this year, he was in the low 30s from a 3-point percentage overall. So seeing him go 5 for 10 even in a small 3-game set is pretty good. And I think the videos show when he has his body under control, when he's going straight up and straight down, just kind of stopping and popping. I think he could be a very efficient 3-point shooter. It comes when he's fading to the left, fading to the right. I think that's going to be, what's drawing his average down. But now that he's in AAU, he's been playing the U17 age group for a few years. So he's the veteran. He's the OG of the team. And I would expect to see more scoring. I think this weekend there's some highlights on the internet. 24/7 did a write up of the Made Hoops warm up in New Jersey. So once again, a local Northeast teams, but you could see him getting to the rim. You could see him attacking with that quickness that he has, and you can kind of see his patented get a defensive rebound and pitch the ball up ahead to teammates. So, big fan of what he will eventually bring whenever that is to Carolina. But I think for any AAU play, especially when it comes to EYBL, we'll be looking at his 3-point shooting and his scoring ability and what he's able to do from that perspective.
Any reason to think that he won't be able to become uh, a better college defender, or that he won't be able to improve his jump shot by the time he matriculates to Chapel Hill, regardless of when that is?
I mean, from a defensive perspective, I'd say I know that the size is always going to be an issue, whether we're talking college or his NBA prospects. And you will have teams that will try to target him, whether it's a bigger offensive player or getting him into the post. But he moves his feet so quickly that even going back to the World Cup when he was playing against guys anywhere from 3 to 10 years older than him, he moved his feet really quickly. He was really aggressive in almost being a pest on the ball, so that the guy just wanted to give the ball up. And I think that is something that he's going to bring. So I think defensively, there are the size concerns, but I think from an effort perspective, he really puts a lot of effort defensively. You can kind of watch him. He's almost the quarterback on the floor in terms of, when the ball's on the opposite corner, he's in a good help side position. He knows kind of where the other offensive players are going, who's going to get screened, et cetera. He's calling it out. So I kind of like his defensive potential, especially for putting on ball pressure. Shooting wise, I mean, I think that's always going to be a concern for high school players going up, unless you are just a pure shooter. But I think there's always going to be an adjustment to that size and that length. So if he's able to, I think, show an increased percentage this year, that will bode well. But once again, no matter what he does this year, teams are most likely going to go under screens, going to force him to prove that he can make it at the college level, and that's definitely going to be something he needs to work on. But I think when he is shooting under control, I think I think he can shoot a 35% or better in those situations.
That will be music to Tar Heel fans' ears. Sherrell, I want to ask you before we start talking about something other than high school recruiting. Have you heard any updates on any of UNC's prospects potentially taking other visits, regardless of which class they're looking at?
As far as high school players,
Yes, any of UNC's potential targets, anything new developing on that front, or should we just move on to portal talk?
there's one, but we haven't been able to independently confirm it, so I
Okay,
don't want to say it until we actually confirm it. But
fair enough.
one of their targets we think was on campus at another place, but we just haven't confirmed it yet.
Fair enough. And that's on me, listeners, because I did not prep Sherrell for that question adequately. So I will wear that. Totally mark that up as Joey not being a team player and not getting everybody on the same page before leaving the huddle. Sherrell, I think one of the big things that's gone on over the last 2 weeks is kind of nothing, right? Like the big thing that's been going on is kind of the absence of real activity. We saw Paxton Wojcik commit to North Carolina out of Brown in the transfer portal, but we haven't really seen anything since then. What we have seen is a huge wave since the season has ended of players entering their name in the transfer portal. Some already have an idea of where they're going before they even announce. Some are, testing to see whether they have any NBA stock and maybe intending to transfer if that doesn't pan out, or maybe they're staying in. Who knows? Sherrell, I want to ask you, if you wouldn't mind, for our listeners and viewers, reset where North Carolina is and who inside Carolina can confirm North Carolina is speaking to and is quote unquote recruiting.
So yeah, there are public names and then there are non-public names. Some of the non-public names we know, but haven't gotten clearance to share. Some of the non-public names we don't know. As far as the public names, it mainly revolves around a few guys. So obviously there's Nick Timberlake. I almost said Justin. I'm so glad I caught myself. But there's Nick Timberlake, who
would have to tell you bye.
Yes, he would. He took an official visit 2 weeks ago. Coming out of that visit, it was a dead period, and after the dead period, he was at Kansas this past weekend and is scheduled to be at UConn this coming weekend. So we're not sure if he plans to do any visits aside of that. He's the transfer from Townsend, again, someone who shot, I believe, 41 or 42%, arguably the best shooter in the portal right now. So North Carolina's been after him for some time. Dalton Connect is someone who UNC we know is called at least once. After that, it gets a little hazy. We're not sure what type of communication they've had with him since that initial phone call, because his recruitment is super, super quiet. Jalen Withers, and Connect is at the other UNC, Northern Colorado. Jalen Withers, a Charlotte native, who played 3 years at North Mac before playing his senior high school in Ohio. Was at Louisville prior, entered the portal. We know North Carolina's had some pretty significant contact with him, multiple conversations with Sean May as well as with Hubert Davis. And I think that's one to really monitor closely in the coming days and weeks or week. Harrison Ingram is probably the biggest name from a Carolina perspective that's entered the portal. He's done it since the last time we all talked. I believe he entered this past Tuesday, and He's one that as soon as the name came in the portal, UNC pretty much made a call. He kind of checks all the boxes of what they're looking for in the portal. They've had a chance to kind of vet who he is. They know what kind of player he is. Half of the staff, I guess, recruited him when he originally came out of Texas in the class of 2021. Roy Williams offered, but obviously Hubert Davis was on staff. Brad Frederick was an assistant on staff, and Sean May was in an administrative capacity. So they know his family pretty well, and they were able to jump on that one pretty quickly. So that's kind of right now, I think the known public names, but obviously there are guys behind the scenes, as I said, that they're talking to that we don't know about. And again, guys that we know about, they're talking to behind the scenes, but just haven't been able to get clearance to share those.
Sherrell, can you share those last two sentences again, please?
So there are names that they are talking to that haven't become public. Some we know about, some we don't. But we know that there are additional, lines they have out besides the ones that the public knows
Okay, so I want to ask a question. Are there players that North Carolina is talking to
about.
that maybe aren't public, or maybe that Inside Carolina cannot report or has not reported on yet? Would you say that's true?
Yes.
Okay. So then moving on, and again, good talk on the reset. I want to recap for everybody the players at North Carolina and can be confirmed by IC's reporting in multiple ways. Nick Timberlake, Dalton Connect, Jalen Withers, Harrison Ingram. But there are also some names that aren't on that list that North Carolina is talking to, and there are some names that maybe we don't know of that North Carolina is talking to. Sherrell, I want to ask you, what would you say to folks that are in the North Carolina fan base or might be listening to this show? They're starting to kind of do some hand wringing because, and again, I can get preachy at times, but this is something where I understand why some folks may be hand wringing because they're starting to see, especially with the calendar being what it is, you're seeing players commit to other schools. You're seeing the portal is massive right now. I mean, it's absolutely insane how many people are trying to fit in this one little hot tub. So it's really crowded in there right now, and people are not seeing North Carolina, quote, publicly name or publicly be tied to recruiting anybody. What would you say to folks who are starting to kind of gnash some teeth and wring their hands a little bit about North Carolina's perceived inactivity, in addition to what we may have already said?
Well, I would say, I'm not going to tell them it's not justified because, as we've said before, this is a new way to build a roster for UNC. It's very
And,
different from
and
what
that's
they've
not a
always
Nick.
done.
That's not a Nick Timberlake comment.
Right.
Justified has nothing to do with Timberlake here. You're just saying that the thought of our listeners is justified. Please continue.
Correct. And it's, North Carolina's been somewhere where people go and they usually stay. Uh, you know, I think Carolina fans for a long time boasted about the fact that between, I guess, the Wares when they left, or Larry Drew when they left, and maybe when Seventh Woods left in 2020, they went 7 or 8 years without, a scholarship transfer.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're used to that kind of stability, and then you lose 4 guys to the transfer portal this offseason, and then you lose 2 to their eligibility being gone, it's a huge void in the roster. And so it's uncomfortable. So I'm not going to get on folks for feeling a little bit of worry. What I would say is that if you look at how long the transfer portal is open, we're not quite at the halfway point. It opened the day after Selection Sunday, so that was March 13th, I believe, and then it stays open for 60 days after that, which puts us around May 12th, May 13th. So we're not quite halfway there. So there's going to be more players to enter the portal. There could be more players to leave UNC. We'll see. Last year we didn't expect Kerwin Walton to leave, and he left on the last day. So you kind of have to play these things out all the way through the day that the portal closes. Even then, there's no date that says you have to make a college decision by this date. You have to be in the portal. Doesn't mean you have to make a decision. So guys, even after they enter the portal, can still take multiple visits, kind of see how things play out, maybe hold their spot and see who's going to what school and find the most advantageous situation for themselves. So I would say that. And then the other, I guess, cache of players that could become available are the folks who have entered the NBA draft, but simultaneously entered the portal. They don't have to remove their names from the draft to keep their college eligibility until May 31st. So May 12th, 13th, May 31st are the two dates that I think Carolina fans should really be looking at, because that's when you'll start to get a little more clarity on what's what. Until then, everything is just kind of up in the air. And I would just advise folks, I know it's not fun. I was going to choose another word, but I know it's uncomfortable and not fun, but I would just urge them to judge the whole, in a couple of months as opposed to each individual tidbit of news that comes out. Um, just because Carolina calls a player doesn't mean they're recruiting that player. Just because, a player visits somewhere else or is talking to other schools doesn't mean they don't like Carolina. It's just a process that has to play out. And that's uncomfortable because you want the results and you want them now, especially when you have 5 open scholarships, but it's just not going to work that way this time.
And with the level of uncomfortability, it's somewhere between watching Geely in standard definition and taking a Shawn Michaels, you know, sweet chin music to the groin, right? It's somewhere in the middle of there. Some people may feel it's really difficult. Some people may feel like, man, may just be frustrated about it. Cheryl, I also want to ask you this. Is it possible that there are players who have not entered their names in the transfer portal who are reaching out to different programs and inquiring what their fit might be or what the interest level on the program might be?
100%. And
Okay.
not just to intermediaries from whatever school you cheer for. They're doing it to a lot of places. And that's what this is. Again, I can't stress enough that this is free agency with less rules. It's free agency if LeBron had no contract and was just like, I feel like going to the Spurs today, and like, okay, I'm gonna tell the Lakers that I'm leaving and I'm going to the Spurs. That's what this is. And so guys are I'll tell you this, there are players who are signing with agents for the express purpose of getting NIL deals from within the portal. So they're not trying to get marketing deals like when they go pro, they're not trying to get workouts with teams. It's explicitly to help them get stuff from the net school, and the representatives of that school. So that's the kind of stuff that's going on. And it's just different. It's very different and it's very taxing on all these coaching staffs. Again, I'm not saying to feel sorry for them because they do make pretty good money. So I'm not saying feel sorry for them, but it has made their jobs much more difficult. And it's just made a situation that had one or two pieces and put 7 ingredients in there. So if you're baking the UNC roster cake, what used to be like vanilla frosting and eggs is now like vanilla frosting and eggs and oil and four more other ingredients. And you're trying to mix all that to create a roster. And it's hard, honestly.
Well, and the extra ingredients like cardamom or something that's really, really weird and has no business being around a vanilla frosting cake. And your point about bringing agents into to the conversation is a good one. Agents, their number one job is to, you know, talk a dog off of a gut wagon to get a better deal for their client, right? That's what they're supposed to do, and they're going to do that when they're reaching out to these potential future schools for their college players that they're working for. Sean, I want to come to you for one more question before we put a bow on the show tonight. Of the four players that Sherrell has been able to confirm publicly that North Carolina is in conversation with about potential transfers. That is Nick Timberlake, Dalton Connect, Jalen Withers, Harrison Ingram. Which one seems like the best fit considering the hole that the starting lineup has right now? They basically have, two known starters. So which one of those four players would be the most instant fit as a starting role for the Tar Heels for next year?
That's a tough question, just given given the fact that there's really three spots up for grabs. I mean, I think Timberlake from a shooting perspective, but going back through the video work that we did, I'd still be more comfortable with him coming off the bench if you're a team that's trying to compete. But I could see him being the starting two guard, just knowing that there's going to be a lot of play. You're going to have to diagram your offense in certain situations to make him effective. I think I don't think Harrison Ingram is the biggest name in the portal, and was a big fan of him coming out of high school. I think he can, with his passing ability, he definitely, and his size, I think can fit a few different positions. But his shooting numbers have been extremely subpar the first 2 years. I think those can those can get better if he's not maybe the focal point of the offense, but definitely some concerns around there. And Dalton Connect, just from his size and shooting, probably just that the profile fits the best. But once again, you're coming from Northern Colorado to a potential high major, and there's a huge adjustment right there. So I'd probably go Ingram just in terms of the best. I don't know if you say best fit, but the most needed player, just given what he could bring and the talent level that I think he can get to. I mean, this is a guy that was the Pac-12 freshman of the year just 2 years ago. Still is getting an NBA look, so he has the most NBA potential, but there's definitely some things he needs to improve upon. But then again, if there weren't, he wouldn't be in the portal, and he'd be getting ready for the NBA draft. So I think with any weakness, any con, there's pros to go with that. And then last but not least, Withers, very interesting from a numbers perspective, playing on one of the worst ACC teams in history. I think it's going to take a little visualization to imagine that, but I think from his profile, that 4-3 is what UNC will always be looking for going forward, and I think that position will determine, really how they do during the year, while Hubert Davis is the coach at UNC.
Awesome. Thanks for that synopsis, man. All right, boys. In light of it being a shorter show than usual, do we have one penny from each of you? Maybe a combined 2 pennies you want to throw before we get out of here?
My one penny. I just wish I could see inside of Sherrell's phone and see what's going on.
Nobody wants that. If you saw it, we'd have to kill you.
That's true. So I'd rather stay alive, but it'll be interesting what happens over the next week or two. I think there's a lot of excitement over Timberlake. Now he's taking visits. There's a lot of guys in the portal, but there's not a lot of legit guys. At least, that can make a big difference in the starting lineup right now. So for me, just continuing to monitor what's going on with the guys that have been named and who comes on the market over the next few weeks.
Sean, I can tell you what is in Sherrell's phone, and that is the premium code to Johnny T-shirt, so he can get his extra 10% off. That's probably not why you were wanting to see inside of Sherrell's phone, because that premium 10% off code is available to all premium subscribers at Inside Carolina to get that extra 10 from Johnny T-shirt, johnnytshirt.com. Y'all thought I was going to get out without this read. And if you thought that I was not going to make Johnny T-shirt read in the show, then how dare you? How dare you, sirs or ma'ams? Johnny T-shirt has been sponsoring Inside Carolina and IC content for quite some time. We're so grateful that they do. Spring is upon us. Go and get your warm weather gear. As we sit here, it should be the last night of weather being in the 30s, probably for the rest of the year. So go ahead and go buy Johnny T-shirt, get you some shorts, get you some tanks if you're a tank person. Just go ahead and get your gear for warm weather, and Johnny T-shirt will be sure to hook you up with all of the best brands that you can think of. UNC gear from the greatest folks that you know of, right there on East Franklin Street, alumni-owned, family-operated. Johnny T-shirt and johnnytshirt.com. Sherrell, do you have 1 cent that you would like to throw in on the back of that Johnny T-shirt read?
No, just things should continue to move in the direction towards completing a roster as we go through April. The dead period ends on Friday, so potentially it could be, visitors in. We'll if there are, we'll try to confirm those. And then the weekend after that is the first live period for AAU. There's back-to-back weekends at the end of April. Always fun going to AAU event and trying to keep up with the NFL draft. We do that every year, and it's fun. And then you get into May, and it'll be almost time for the first session to start, and really for whoever is there to start gelling as they put together more pieces. Then you start getting towards the combine. So I think we are still some time away from UNC's roster being finalized. So just hold steady. And again, if the roster doesn't look like you think it should, or doesn't look like a contender in June, then judge away. Let's say June 15th. Let's say 2 months from now. Let's say June 10th.
If it Father's Day. If you are opening your Father's Day gifts from Johnny T-shirt and you are not happy with your gift or with the way that you have seen North Carolina's roster develop, then get on your keyboards and go nuts. Correct, Cheryl?
Yeah, yeah, because I don't want people to think that we're absolving the coaching staff
Not
from,
at all.
from going out and doing a great job. It's just that it's impossible with this many moving pieces to really lock in a roster at this moment. It's really, really difficult. So my advice would just, my penny would be to don't live or die with every tidbit of information. Just kind of take it all as a whole and go from there, because things change quickly, and sometimes things seem like they change quickly when really nothing changed at all. So that'd be my advice. It's just take each little nugget of information for what it is, and keep it moving, and don't make every recruitment or every morsel of information a referendum on Hubert Davis or his staff. Do that on June 15th.
And also, if there's a lack of information, don't judge that either, right? Just sit tight, be patient. Again, we understand that, in an information now world in which we live, it's hard to do. But folks, just know, if there is news to be broken.
No, I was just gonna say, think about it. To your point, I know we're trying to go off of here, but Paxton Wojcik, how long ago was it when he committed? Or how long does it feel like? Yeah, it was 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But it feels like It feels like months.
Yeah.
But it was 2 weeks ago. And that's just because the way we get information now, is through social media and everything. Almost every contact and every call is cataloged and referenced, from coaches to players. And, that's just not the way it used to be. So I would say just take a break, relax, see where things are on June 15th. Judge away on June 15th if it doesn't look good. But for now, it's just going to be impossible to have any guess what the roster is going to look like next season at this moment. It's going to be some time.
And like I was saying, if there is news to be broken, you can trust that Sherrell McMillan, Sean Moran, or someone from inside Carolina will break that news for you. Sherrell is all over this. And again, if it's something that IC can report and can verify, we're going to have it for you. So just stick with us. Appreciate you listening to the show tonight. Appreciate you being a part of our little Coast to Coast family. Shout out to Johnny T-Shirt for sponsoring and to John Siegley for producing. Most importantly, shout out to Sean Moran and for Sherrell McMillan being a part of this show and bringing all the knowledge and the insight that they do. But until next time, stick around. We'll probably have some news for you, at least in a week. Because in a week, we'll be back. We'll be doing another show. And if something happens between now and then, we'll be here then too. But I'm just Joey Powell. I've been your host. Thanks for being a part of the Coast to Coast podcast here on InsideCarolina.com.